You are sitting in a room with people who smile at you. They nod when you speak. They agree with your words. But you feel it, don't you? That subtle, invisible pressure. The weight of their expectations pressing against your throat. The unspoken demand that you perform, that you justify, that you prove you deserve the space you occupy. You have been playing a game you did not consent to. A game where the rules shift based on who is watching, where your success is interpreted as arrogance, where your confidence is reframed as threat, where your silence is read as guilt and your explanation is read as weakness. This is not paranoia. This is the architecture of social hierarchy. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something that modern society actively conceals. The world does not reward virtue. It rewards the appearance of control. When you walk into a room where people want you to fail, you are not dealing with rational actors. You are dealing with egos that require your diminishment to maintain their equilibrium. They do not hate you because you did something wrong. They hate you because your existence reminds them of what they are not. Your composure threatens their need for chaos. Your progress exposes their stagnation. Your refusal to collapse validates their fear that maybe, just maybe, they are the ones who are weak. So they test you, not with direct confrontation. That would be too honest. They test you with subtlety, a comment that feels innocent but lands like a blade, a question posed as concern but designed to make you second-guess yourself. A rumor whispered just loud enough for you to hear the echo. And here is where most people lose. They try to defend themselves. They try to clarify. They try to prove that the accusation is false, that the interpretation is wrong, that they are still worthy of being in the room. But the moment you defend, you have already submitted to their frame. You have accepted their authority to judge you. You have agreed to play a game where they hold all the cards. Machiavelli would call this a tactical surrender disguised as diplomacy. The truth is this: when everyone wants you to fail, defense is not a strategy, it is a death rattle. Because the people who want to see you fall are not interested in facts. They are interested in blood. They want to see you flinch. They want to see you scramble. They want confirmation that underneath your composure, you are just as fragile as they are. But what if you did not flinch? What if, when the accusation came, you simply looked at them? No explanation, no justification, no performance of innocence. Just a steady, unreadable gaze that communicates a single, silent truth. I am not playing this game with you. This is where power lives. Not in dominance, not in aggression, but in the refusal to participate in your own trial. Most people cannot do this because they are addicted to being understood. They believe that if they can just explain themselves clearly enough, the other person will see the truth and relent. But understanding is not the currency of power. Leverage is. And when you explain, you give them leverage. You reveal your buttons. And you show them exactly which strings to pull to make you dance. Machiavelli wrote that the prince must appear merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious, but must be flexible enough to act otherwise when necessary. Translate this to the social battlefield. You must appear calm, reasonable, and unbothered. But you must be internally detached enough to let them drown in their own expectations. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. When someone tries to bait you into a reaction, they are performing a psychological test. They are checking to see if you still need their approval, if you still fear their judgment, if you are still tethered to the validation economy that keeps most people in chains. The moment you stop reacting, you sever that tether. You become unreadable. And an unreadable person is a person who cannot be controlled. But let us go deeper, because the people who want you to fail are not a monolith. They operate in patterns. There are 3 primary archetypes you will encounter, and each requires a different form of strategic non-engagement. The first is the proxy attacker. This person does not have the courage to confront you directly, so they work through gossip, through insinuation, through plausible deniability. They plant seeds of doubt in the minds of others. They ask leading questions. Have you noticed that he's been acting strange lately? They frame concern as caring, but the subtext is poison. The proxy attacker wants you to hear the whispers. They want you to become paranoid. They want you to start explaining yourself to people who did not even ask. Because the moment you do that, Or you validate the narrative they are building. The Machiavellian response is silence. You do not address rumors. You do not correct misinformation. You let the gossip circulate, and you watch who repeats it. Because the people who spread it have just revealed themselves. They have shown you where their loyalty lies. They have told you without saying it directly that they are not safe. You file this information away, you smile, you nod, and you quietly remove them from the inner circle. Not with drama, not with confrontation. You simply stop offering them access to your world. They will notice. They will wonder why, but you will never explain. The second archetype is the moral adjudicator. This person weaponizes ethics. They position themselves as the conscience of the group, the one who holds everyone accountable. They are obsessed with fairness, with justice, with making sure that no one gets away with anything. But underneath the moral posturing is something darker. Envy. The moral adjudicator cannot tolerate your success because they have tied their identity to their suffering. They have convinced themselves that the world is rigged, that people like you only win because you cheat, because you cut corners, because you do not care about others. When you succeed without apologizing for it, you shatter their narrative. You prove that the world is not as deterministic as they need it to be. You prove that maybe, just maybe, their failure is not the result of systemic injustice, but of their own inaction. So they come for you. They point out your flaws. They demand that you acknowledge your privilege. They insist that you confess to the invisible advantages that explain your position. And if you engage, if you try to prove that you earned it, that you worked for it, that you deserve it, you lose. Because the moral adjudicator does not want proof. They want submission. They want you to feel guilty for existing above them. The Machiavellian response is agreement without submission. You're right, I've been fortunate. And then you say nothing else. You do not elaborate. You do not defend. You acknowledge the surface of their accusation while refusing to accept the shame they are trying to attach to it. This disarms them because they were expecting a fight. They were expecting you to justify yourself, to list your hardships, to prove that you suffered too. When you do not give them that fight, they are left holding a weapon with no target. And they look foolish, and you look unbothered. The third archetype is the most dangerous, the formerly close ally. This is the person who was with you when you were struggling, who supported you when you were nothing, who believed in you before anyone else did. But now that you have risen, they have stayed in place. And that delta, that gap between where you are and where they are, has curdled their affection into resentment. They do not say it directly. They say things like, "You've changed," or "Remember when we used to just have fun?" or "I feel like I don't even know you anymore." What they are really saying is, "I preferred you when you were beneath me." This person is the hardest to cut away because they are wrapped in the language of loyalty. They remind you of the past. They guilt you with nostalgia. They make you feel like you owe them something because they were there before. But Machiavelli warned against this sentimentality. He said that a prince must not be bound by past debts when those debts become liabilities. The formerly close ally is a liability. They are an anchor, and if you do not release them, they will drag you back down to the level where they feel comfortable. The Machiavellian response is distance without explanation. You do not owe them a breakup speech. You do not owe them closure. You simply become less available. You respond slower. You decline invitations. You allow the relationship to fade through natural entropy. They will feel it. They will accuse you of abandoning them. They will tell others that success changed you. Let them. Because the only people who are upset that you have outgrown them are the people who benefited from your smallness. Now let us address the deeper mechanism at play. Why does your success provoke such hostility? Why can you not simply exist at a higher level without triggering this psychological warfare? Because human beings are hierarchical animals. We are wired to assess status. And when someone rises in status, it forces everyone else to recalibrate their position relative to that person. This recalibration is uncomfortable. It is destabilizing. It threatens the story people have told themselves about why they are where they are. If you succeed and you came from the same place they did, then they can no longer blame external factors for their stagnation. They have to confront the possibility that the difference between you and them is not luck. It is not privilege. It is choice. It is discipline. It is the willingness to endure discomfort that they were not willing to endure. And that realization is intolerable. So instead of confronting it, they project it. They decide that you must have cheated, you must have compromised, you must have sold out, because if you did not, then they have no excuse. Your very existence becomes a mirror that reflects their unfulfilled potential. And people hate mirrors that show them what they refuse to see. So how do you win when everyone wants you to fail? You stop trying to win their approval. You stop trying to prove that you are good. You stop trying to make them comfortable with your success. You accept that their discomfort is not your responsibility, and you accept that their resentment is not your problem. You accept that you cannot control how they interpret your existence. All you can control is your refusal to collapse under the weight of their expectations. Machiavelli said that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But in the modern context, fear is not about intimidation. It is about inscrutability. It is about being the person who cannot be read, cannot be manipulated, cannot be baited into a reaction. When they attack, you do not defend. When they gossip, you do not correct. When they demand explanations, you offer none. You become a void. And voids are terrifying because they cannot be controlled. This is how you win. Not by fighting, not by proving, but by refusing to participate in the theater of your own destruction. You let them perform. You let them exhaust themselves, and you continue moving forward as if they do not exist. Because in the architecture of power, the person who is unbothered is the person who is untouchable, and eventually they will stop trying to make you fall. Not because they respect you, but because they realize that you are unreachable, that you operate in a different reality, that you have exited the game entirely. And when they realize that, they will have no choice but to kneel, not with words, but with silence. The kind of silence that only comes when someone realizes they are standing in the presence of something they cannot diminish. That is not revenge. That is inevitability.